So the best of the best starts with something called PYSOPing. PYSOPing. Did you remember seeing that on a handout earlier? Were you curious? Maybe a little bit? Okay. The word is spelled with PYSOP, 5 letters, and it stands for 5 words. But I'm going to just explain that some time ago, we started asking our clients to stop writing and stop journaling. And some of you are curious, why would we do that? Well, I've been an English teacher in Academy High School. I've also been an English teacher in elementary school. And I'm very aware that there's a good majority of my students in those classes that don't like that class. How many of you did not like language arts or English? Go ahead, raise your hand. You won't hurt me. I mean, there's only a couple hands. That means the rest of you loved English class? Oh, this is a highly unusual group. Highly unusual. Because most hands are raised. I hated English. I hated writing. I hated reading. Well, my clients come to us that way. And if I suggest that they write something, I'm suggesting that they do something organized, that follows a rule, that keeps the language clear, that makes for punctuation. And so I came up with a different way, and it's called PYSOPing. And instead of being academic and like school, it is therapeutic. Now, wouldn't that make sense? So let's take a look. When we grieve, our grief is super messy. It's really disorganized. It is not something that we can, it's chaotic and it's unpredictable. And when we're grieving, we are grieving with a broken heart, a hole in our heart. Now, we've learned that people with grief lose their mental capacities for a little while. Any of us have experienced that? We don't think clearly. We can't make decisions. We're kind of just lost. Our memory feels like it flew away to China. And that's because that hole in our heart is so huge that we're barely just holding on to waking up every day. Now, so it's messy and it's painful and it's wildly unpredictable. We can be hot one moment and cold another emotionally. It can just go all over the map. Now, if I were to ask you to write something while you're in this state of being, would that be very easy to do? Less easy to do than you think. So my good friend Pam, who had her babies at the same time I had my babies, after her husband died, said, Karen, I've been trying to write, I've been trying to journal every day, and I get nothing from it, absolutely nothing from it. So I said, so what do you do before you start writing? She goes, well, I try to organize my thoughts. Can that happen? And so she tries to take an intellectual, mental approach and to put that on paper, to write about it. And she gets no positive result. And it was there in her car that I realized. I told her, Pam, stop writing. Don't write anymore. But do you have things on your heart about your husband and about this grief? Do you have stuff that you're carrying? Yes, yes, yes. So I said, so stop writing. Don't do any of the things that have to do with writing. Just put your stuff on paper. PYSOP. Can you say it with me? PYSOP. Oh, do it again. Because a new word takes a few times to say it, right? So when we are PYSOPing, we are putting our stuff on paper. PYSOP. Put your stuff on paper. Now, we've got stuff when we're grieving. And it needs to be released. And this is why this is the best of the best. Because we don't hurt anybody else when we put our stuff on paper. And we release what might be hurting inside of us when we put our stuff on paper. And we can give it over to God in prayer on paper by saying, God, this is what's happening to me. Have you ever read any of the Psalms that sounded like PYSOPing? Absolutely. David is one of our best examples. And so the best of the best is that we are not made to be grief containers, to hold our grief inside. It will hurt our bodies physically. It will damage our spiritual relationships and our friend relationships. We are not meant to hold our grief inside. And so the best of the best is to give ourselves the freedom and the space to put our stuff on paper. Put your stuff on paper, to PYSOP. Now, it's my dream that before I die, PYSOP will be in the English dictionary. So you all can help me do that and really use the word and its meaning, because are we writing when we're PYSOPing? No, it is not an academic experience. We don't care about the rules of the language, the spelling, the handwriting, the punctuation, the syntax, and the grammar. None of that is in our frame of reference. All we're simply doing is PYSOPing. We're putting our stuff on paper. So, because we've flown all the way from California to Wisconsin to be with you, I can't just tell you about PYSOPing. Can we just tell them about PYSOPing? No. We want to make sure you get a practice with it. And so on your handout today, one side of the paper says PYSOP. Put your stuff on paper. And so I've provided 3 different jump lines, what I call. Can you read them from where you're at? I'll read them to you, and for those that are looking in and watching or listening, here's one of the jump lines you could start with. When I remember, and then whatever your memory is in your grief or loss story. The other jump line can start with ever since, and you can keep going with that thought. And the last jump line is, my grief is important because, and you keep going.
Remember, this is not just about a death experience. This could be any kind of loss that you've had. Maybe you've gone through a child estrangement, you've had a divorce, you've had a house burned down, you've lost your job, you've lost all your life savings in a bad business deal, you've lost friends, you've lost faith. There's a number of things you can put on here. So don't think of this as thinking, oh, I don't have anybody that has died recently. That's okay. There's plenty of other things I'm sure you might be able to come up with, okay?
So I want to tell you right from the beginning, you will never be asked to share this PYSOP with somebody. This is yours. This is private. You will not share it with anybody. Secondly, if you sit there and choose not to give it a practice, give it a try, you might miss out on something really, really powerful in your life.
We're teachers by trade, and I used to do outdoor school a lot with my students, and we would take them out to places where we had people come and cook food, and we always had a one-bite rule. You know what the one-bite rule was? That everybody has to try something that they don't think they'll like, at least one bite. So we're asking them PYSOPing, think of this as the one-bite rule. Give it a try, and you might really like it.
Yeah, you sure might. Absolutely. So once you've selected your jump line, I'm starting the timer for just 4 minutes. And I'm going to ask that nobody have a conversation with anybody during this 4 minutes, and that you each take your first practice of PYSOPing. You may begin. When I remember, ever since, or my grief is important because.
In about 20 seconds.
That's our little chime to tell us that our 4 minutes has ended. Is this on?
We're just getting feedback. Can you hear us?
Okay, that's fine. So if you found that there is still more inside of your heart that you would like to put on paper, I would so encourage you to continue PYSOPing at a quiet time later on today. But I'm curious, I do not want to hear what you put on paper, but is there anybody that would like to say what this experience was like for you? What was it like to put your stuff on paper? Was it hard? Was it easy? Did it generate something that you now feel like you've processed it on paper, that you've let it go on paper, and you feel a sense of relief or release? Some people do, some people don't. Is there anybody in the audience that would just like to raise their hand? This is what PYSOPing was like for me. Yes, nice and loud. Beautiful. This gentleman says, I would admit things to myself on paper that I might not think about. So it is a wonderful place to practice honesty and just see what is revealed when we will do that. Thank you. Is there anybody else that had a PYSOP? Yes. Lovely. Could I just say, by PYSOPing it down, you can actually see it. So it brings clarity, doesn't it? Yeah, makes it real. Is there a third person that would just like to share? Yes, what was it like, Leanne? It can build a much closer relationship with the Lord. And we see that in the Psalms. I saw it in my personal journey, which is why I wrote Comfort for the Day, Living Through the Seasons of Grief. And we just want to make sure that for everyone who's going home with your own personal Comfort for the Day book, that you don't look at those lined pages and just skip over them. That's where the healing is. That's where your PYSOPing gets to release your honest self and find the clarity and find the voice of Jesus coming behind as you put that on paper.
We find that as we talking it out, we have a lot of our clients say, I just like to talk about it, and that is fine. There's a place for that. But if you keep just talking about it, it becomes circular, we call it. It goes out here, out in the air, and it comes back in here. And we hear it over and over and over again. In some ways, we kind of gently re-traumatize ourselves by, now, initially, we want to tell our story, our grief story, a lot, don't we, Karen?
Sure we do, and we need to.
But if we continue with anything, if we fill up a water balloon too big, it eventually pops. If we eat too much, we feel like we're going to pop. Anything, all containers have a limit, don't they? The Lord never intended for us to be what, Karen?
Grief containers.
But if you can look at PYSOPing as almost like a relief valve for your grief, and it's a matter of putting pen or pencil to paper, that pent-up grief, as it were, goes out of your emotions and down your arm and onto paper, and that's where it can stay. Recent research is starting to show that there is value and cognitive value of putting, and kinesthetic value, brain and hand, of putting things on paper with a pen or a pencil. Now, can you PYSOP on a computer? You can. I do it a lot myself. But the best times for me is when I actually start putting it out on paper. I can't even read. I can't read my writing anyway. My students would say, "What did you put up on the board, Mr. Nicola?" But when I'm doing, I don't cross my T's, I don't dot my I's, I don't put periods at the end of sentences, and sometimes I'm just putting. It's like I'm like a 3-year-old thinking he's writing. And I'm putting it on paper, but the thoughts are coming out here, you see. And I can kind of read it when I go back to it. If you want to go back and read it, you might want to make sure it's a little more legible. But if not, you will find that that is a great release. Men, we didn't talk a lot about men and tears. But did you notice Pastor Venon this week? What did you notice about him a lot when he was speaking? Huh? Did he choke up sometimes? Did he tear up? Did any man here think he was less of a man for standing here and having a emotional moment in front of you all? Let me ask you, does anybody think that Pastor Venon was a wuss, a weakling, a guy weak in faith because he had tears coming out of his eyes?
Not one of us.
Not one of us, did we? There is no shame in tears, men and women. And so I mentioned the other day, let's not apologize for our tears. But what I was getting at is that for us, for a lot of men, I've found with men I've worked with, as we write letters to our loved one, to our children, the tears flow many times. Because a lot of men say, I don't know how to cry. And I would agree. Most of us didn't. I did not know how to cry until I moved to Alaska. When I was living in Alaska, I had friends that were mountain men, fishermen, pilots, and when something sad happened, they would cry. I said, wow, here's a friend of mine that I respect and look up to, and literally and figuratively, and here are men that are crying without shame. And my friends in Alaska taught me more about crying than any other group of men I've ever had the privilege of knowing. And so I encourage you men to not hold back the tears particularly around other men. Sometimes we try to hold it back. But putting our thoughts and our feelings and our emotions on paper, if you're having a hard time crying and think that you need to, put it on paper. Put your stuff on paper. Trust me, if tears don't come, that's not a bad thing, okay? But it's the even better thing if it can happen.
Okay, thank you, honey. Thank you so much. So this is our best of our best for our grievers, and it will help you get the best of the best from your Comfort for the Day book. Let's move on to what the best of the best is for those who are a supportive friend, those that want to come alongside. And we call it the ministry of quiet presence. And I can't give you a better illustration for that than the one I was just told yesterday. There was a family in a church community whose teenage daughter died a tragic death. And the pastor went to their home immediately. They welcomed him in. He didn't give a Bible verse. He didn't pray with them. He just sat with them. Let them talk, let them cry, let them be whatever they needed to be. And then the phone rang, and he got up and answered the phone, took a message and said, "We'll call you back." He went back to sit with them. To sit with them. He was practicing what Job's friends had done so well the first 7 days. The phone rang again. He picked it up, wrote a message, "We'll get back with you." And then between going from the phone to the living room, he peeked by in the kitchen. The sink was full of dishes. So he stepped in there, put the soap in the sink, started washing dishes, cleaning up the kitchen. Then he went back and sat with them, listening. Some months later, that family told the pastor, "You did the best thing that anybody could have done for us." A quiet presence. Now, how do we get to that place? Do only pastors have that skill and ability? I want to read from Isaiah chapter 61. This is the mission of Jesus. And it's the mission for us, not only when people are going through a season of grief through death, but any difficult time in their lives. Are we practicing the presence of Jesus with them? This is Jesus' mission statement. He got up in Nazareth and began to read this, and this is what he said. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. Now, I want to suggest that every description of who is getting benefited here is language of grief. When people are grieving, are they poor in spirit? We're not talking about physical poverty. Jesus came to bring good news to the poor. He sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for captives and release from darkness for prisoners. Don't grievers need that? Don't people who are going through difficult times need that light, need to be released from the prison, need to be set free? Yes, yes. Now let me ask you a question. How many of us would say, I'm following Jesus? Right? We're followers of Jesus. Otherwise known as a Christian, but sometimes Christians don't follow Jesus. And when I read this, and I asked myself the question, am I a follower of Jesus? And I nod up and down, yes. Am I following him here? Or am I too afraid of someone else's pain, and I'll let someone else do that? I had asked myself some really hard questions. If I am a follower of Jesus, and this is Jesus' mission statement, am I showing up where people are hurting? Or am I stepping back? Jesus' mission statement was to show up in a hurting world. In a world full of hurt, he landed and grew up with all the pain that you and I experience. And then he said, I'm going to keep stepping into that pain with other people. I'm going to carry it for them all the way to the cross. So if you keep reading, he says, the good news is to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion. Now I'm going to come back to that little verse that talks about vengeance and the Lord's favor if I have time. But what I'd like to have us do is Isaiah 61, verses 1 to 3. Isaiah 61, 1 to 3. So the best of the best that supportive people need might just be a change of mind and attitude and heart. Do you think that's possible? So then I will choose to step into someone's pain. I will go where the fire has burned down a house. I will go sit with someone who's going through a divorce. I will stay in touch with someone who's devastated over the death of their dog. You see what I'm saying? Am I following Jesus' mission? So, did you want to say something, honey?
I was thinking of those that are in the helping professions. Think about firemen, policemen, nurses, doctors. What happened? Where was the healthcare providers during COVID? Were they running away from the hospitals and the clinics? What were they doing hour after hour after hour? They were putting themselves in harm's way. Many healthcare providers got COVID and died. Where were the firemen on 9/11? Were they running away from the Twin Towers or running toward the Twin Towers? They were running towards. It was in their nature to run toward where there was problems. Policemen are told that there's a power of presence. We're told that many times. I was talking to a fireman this morning. He says we just show up. There's nothing we can do to take away the tragedy, but we just are there. It's a very powerful thing to have a presence at that time.
But to develop the heart set to be there is the best that I want to leave with you. So it might mean that what our hearts have thought about pain or suffering needs to be erased and refilled with the mission of Jesus. So I find that many times I have experienced some sense of judgment or trying to value what someone else's experience is, compare it with my own, maybe just, kind of downplay it. It's not that big of a deal. And so this little quote seems to help me. We witness other people's storms from the shelter of our own perspectives. Just let that sink in for a minute. I woke up this morning and I wrote in my gratitude journal, I am so thankful I got to sleep in a dry bed and sheltered in a cabin last night. I wasn't in the elements of the storm. My perspective was cozy, dry, warm. I slept all night. But there are plenty who had tents that didn't get that same experience. And so when I witness that other people are in storms, I do that from my own perspective. When Jesus came into this world of hurt, did he take on the perspective what it's like to live here? He did. So let's be mindful that we don't add the cold rain of judgment or of separation, or I'm too good, or I'm too afraid, or I don't feel comfortable, or that's not my thing, and we step back and we isolate the brokenhearted person. That we don't add the cold rain of judgment to their already soaked spirits. Do I need an attitude adjustment? Yeah. Maybe one or two of you might need that attitude adjustment. And it's out of the core of our hearts that we will serve and minister. I can't dictate to you exactly how you're going to do that. But I do know that unless our hearts are changed and we really become followers of Jesus to step into that pain, we will leave people soaked with their soaked spirits. Quickly?
I've got lots of thoughts. I was thinking, it's been interesting. We've done, several weeks ago, back several months ago, we were in Keene, Texas, working at the Keene Church. And in the afternoon, we do a seminar on how does the church members comfort each other. And it was interesting. I just was a thought that came to me this morning as I thought about what we were going to say here today. Because I looked out in the audience and I saw, what I thought was, man, I haven't seen this woman since she was in 6th grade. She was one of my students in Alaska. And she's now teaching nursing at Southwestern. And there she was out in the audience. And it dawned on me, up until today, of all the seminars we've done, we haven't had anybody in the audience that knew our son. But Kathy did. And she remembered when he was born, when he would crawl around the school and was learning to open and close doors and stuff. And she knew him. Her presence alone, to have a connection with somebody who remembered our son, was so helpful. That was the only time it's ever happened until we came to Wisconsin camp meeting. And our dear, dear friends, Tom and Melody Machowski, also remember our little boy Dawson. They were there when he was born, and they remembered when he was crawling about. They remember when we took him up to their cabin. They used to live in a little cabin up at a place called Trapper Creek. You could see Mount McKinley, Mount Denali, however you want to put it. And he used to hang out and play around the wood stove and play around their house way out in Nowheresville. And it's so good to have people that their very presence is a connector, particularly if they knew our loved one, you see. And it doesn't mean that you have to know that the person who died to be a powerful presence, but it's even more of a blessing when that person knew the person that died and can say, I remember when. And that's what Kathy did. She said, I remember and she told me, said the very thing I just told you, I remember him crawling around and his funny little, cry and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that was a long time ago, but it brought back a flood of good memories, though, too.
Yeah. And Melody, do you give me permission to share how hard it was for you? One of the things that can step in the way of us stepping close to someone in their pain is that it hurts us too. And for Tom and Melody, it crushed them that Dawson died. They had been praying the year and a half while he had been in remission, along with us. And when that prayer seems to go unanswered, we can have such a crisis of faith as a supportive friend that we don't know how to step in that space ourselves. So, does it behoove us to know of the goodness of God on a suffering planet? To know that God doesn't take our children? To know that leukemia or a car accident or a drunk driver or the person at the office that just pulls the rug out from underneath someone's job? You see, we live on a broken planet. And we need to be really clear of what is Satan's responsibility versus what is God's healing presence.
Yeah.
So we can step close.
I want to add one more thing to that. It's an interesting fine balance, because I work, like I mentioned, I work with a lot of men on a Facebook site called Grieving Fathers, and many of them are so angry that their friends and family are not showing up for them and supporting them like they need to be supported. And we've learned this week that learning to be a good comforter is a learned behavior, isn't it? None of us come wired knowing how to comfort. Just because you've had a death doesn't make you a good comforter. Okay, we had to learn how to do this. But there are some people, when you've had a death in your life, friends of yours or maybe even family members, that are so sensitive and so compassionate that it's more than they can do to be with you for a while. So their absence may not always mean that they don't care. Their absence doesn't mean that they're cold. The absence may be just the very opposite, and they are just struggling with their own grief. And so it's like, what happens, we find a lot of times in support groups, and support groups are good, but in many times it's a group of people that have all fallen overboard and they don't know how to swim. You see, and they're floundering around trying their best to keep their nose above water, and they're all trying to shout instructions to each other about, I guess we're all going to drown. What they don't know is there are people who can throw them a life ring. And so that's why it's so helpful when we have people that can come alongside of us and say, I don't know how you're feeling. I don't know how this is for you, but I want you to know I'm not going to let you be alone. I'm going to be here with you.
Thank you, honey. So the quote we just read and this next one are on one of the sides, on the back side of your PYSOPing. But this one reads, what we need to know, what we as grievers, this is telling us, what we need to know from you, the supportive person, when we grieve, is not that you feel sorry for our loss, but that you have some desire to want to know how our loss makes us feel. Didn't you say that's true? Yeah. So we, as comforting friends, need to search our heart. Am I just sorry for what someone else is going through? Or do I really care about what they're experiencing? Do I care what they are feeling? Will I sit with them and listen to them? You see, I need a change of heart. I need a change of mind to be the comforter.
If you went to your doctor with a broken leg, and he comes into the emergency room where you're at, and your leg's at 90 degrees to where it should be, and he goes, I am so sorry you fell out of that tree and broke your leg. This is so sad for me. I'm just so sad that you broke your leg. And left it at that, it wouldn't feel very helpful, would it? But if he comes in and goes, tell me what's your pain level on 1 to 10? You go, it's a 30. You know, I broke my femur. My sister broke her femur a few months ago, and on top of, anyway, it was painful. But when we ask questions and say, how is it for you today? I have some ideas and some things I can do today. Would one of those be helpful for you? Can I just be here with you for a while? Can we go out and, for men, can we go out and roll a few balls at the alley, or go shooting, or go golfing, or go boating, or whatever? Or do we want to just go and do nothing? We can just go and just sit in the house and do nothing, or drive around. I'm just here. That is the sort of supportive people that mean the most to grievers we have found over the years. And when they say, who was the most helpful? It was simply the people who showed up. It wasn't that they had mounds of things, words of wisdom and things like that to share. I mean, there's always encouraging things that we can say. But at that moment, when you're in the ER and your leg's broken, you don't want to hear a lot other than, can you fix the broken bone? Can you help it? Now, he can't fix it immediately, and there's going to be a lot of pain. But knowing that someone cares about the pain, and that has been my bottom line for years, is I have felt that most grievers, and I've mentioned this before, that the majority of grievers simply want the non-grieving community to acknowledge our pain. This is hard. This is really hard. And I will let you know that I'm sad for that pain.
So, the best of the best for supportive friends is that we have a change of heart and a change of mind, and we begin to follow Jesus as he ministers to the hurting. Can we do that? Do we want to do that? And that can be only something you make that choice to do. But we at Comfort for the Day are here to support you in doing that. And so on our website, we have blogs for supportive friends. So if you need a little encouragement on how to support a friend, go visit those blogs at comfortfortheday.com for supportive friends, and we'll keep supporting you along that line. But we also want to extend this further, besides just possibly our church family. There is a community you live in, community I live in. And if we're following Jesus and stepping into people's pain because we've had a change of heart and a change of mind, we're no longer frightened by their pain. We're no longer pushed back by their pain. We recognize that person in pain needs me to step in and be there and listen. Steve, who have you talked to in the neighborhood that's happened with you?
I mentioned just a week ago, Thursday, we were taking a walk before we flew out here, and I bumped into my neighbor that used to own the house next door. Have I shared this with you? I don't think I did here. Okay, I'm good. I have been known to repeat my stories. So we were walking around, and there was Larry. And Larry, I'd heard from another neighbor that his son, who was one of the grass cutters around the area, had died of cancer. And I had not had a chance to talk to Larry. He lives around the corner. He used to own the house next door, so that's how we got to know each other. And I said, Larry, I understand that your son has died. Tell me his name again. I didn't know his son's name. His son was Mike. He goes, Michael, but we call him Mike. And I said, what happened? He said he had cancer and he went quickly. I said, man, that is such hard news, Larry. How are you and your wife doing with it today? He goes, well, I don't know. I know you guys are those Christian grief people. I know about that, but I'm not a believer myself. My wife is Jewish, and it's been really hard on her, and it's been tough. He said, it's been hard. And he goes, I'm not a believer, but if there's a God, boy, am I angry with what he did to my son, because he died painfully. I said, Larry, that is really hard news too, and I can really sympathize with your pain and your anger. I've felt that, many of those emotions too. Can I leave you with one thing today, Larry? I said, I don't know a lot about God, but I know this much, that he did not do this to your son. Cancer killed your son, not God. And God was right there when he died, and God was holding him and weeping over the loss of another one of his children. I said, God is not responsible for your son's death. And you could see him kind of just relax a little bit. That was a totally new thought, that God was on his side, and God was upset about it and sorry about his son's death, just like he was. But I knew him well enough that I could at least go and have that conversation with him, which we've had many other conversations with many of our neighbors in the last year who have lost close loved ones, children, brothers, sisters, and we've been able to reach out to them, and it's been a wonderful experience.
So neighbors just 3 doors down the road. The man of the house, his brother died, and the wife of the house, her daughter died, suddenly dropped dead at work in her 40s or 50s. Next, in 6 days, his brother died. So this couple now is grieving deeply, deeply. And of course, they are friends of ours already. So we stepped right into their pain with them and sat with them and prayed with them, at least the wife. Gary's not as much.
We're working on Gary.
Yeah. But because we have a grief care team in our church, we asked our grief care team if they would be willing to make a care basket for our friends down the road. Oh, absolutely. So the Auburn Seventh-day Adventist Church grief care team had 2 beautiful cards, one for each of them, a basket full of really lovely things because he likes to cook and she likes to read. And so we took them this care basket. And the cards started with, do you remember, honey?
I remember I just took a peek at the one that she wrote for Gary. And it started, the lady that writes these letters, her own daughter had died back in 2000. And she said, brothers are so special, aren't they? Was how she started the card. And I found out that Gary is very close with his brother.
So this couple that lives just down the street from us, do you think that they'll be receptive to learn more? You bet. And even if they're not, were we there with them? Were we following the mission of Christ, stepping into the space where people are hurting? You see, this is what it's about. And so when we become different in our hearts and different in our minds, we are now living out the mission of Jesus anywhere, anytime. Because I don't know about your corner of the world, but mine is hurting badly. Anybody we will bump into can have a grief and loss story. And so we want to leave you with the best of the best. And on the back side of your PYSOP page, there is what we call the Comforter's Creed. And so let's read this out loud together. Does everybody have the back side of your handout? The Comforter's Creed. Let's read out loud together. Make no assumptions about the griever's faith, their relationship with the deceased, their needs, or how they are grieving. Instead, learn the tactful art of asking questions for clarification. Practice listening to hear with your heart. Do not compare, and banish any ideas of telling your own stories. And give your broken-hearted friends space for expressions of any or all emotions. Remember, becoming a confident comforter means it's all about them. My friends, as we wrap up this week together, we came to give you the best of the best.